Okay, so I posted on the Facebook page that I was going to talk about morality. Okay, that's a really in-depth conversation that a lot of people don't really want to go into. Oh my gosh, I don't want to talk about my morality. I don't want to define my morality. I don't want to explain my morality. Okay, so the biggest point that I can make about morality is that it's entirely subject to your culture, your society, and your beliefs, and your internal, what you see as right and wrong. All right. And that's going to relate to a lot of things as I go through the rest of this ranting and wandering thoughts. So just keep that in mind, that it is based entirely on cultural thoughts. Your cultural beliefs, your societal beliefs, and your group beliefs is what actually determines your morality. And if you can't understand that, then you're probably not going to be able to understand any of the rest of what I'm about to tell you, because it does come from your family. That's the first culture that you are introduced to. That is the first organization that you come into from day one. You are introduced to a culture, to a frame of mind, to a thought, to a belief, to an idea very early on from your family. It could be anything that is introduced to you. It could even be the absence of a family that determines your moral standing and your beliefs. Right? So, quick example, I was raised in a house with a lot of kids. So for me, my cultural understanding of children and of other individuals is quite frankly derived from that. I think it's abnormal for a lot of people to have small families. I have 4 kids of my own, and I love those guys. They drive me crazy at times. Of course they do. They're little kids. But for me and the culture and the family and the organizations that I was around as a child, that was perfectly ordinary for people to have 2, 3, 4, 5 kids or more. All right. And I bring that up as that is the culture, that is the norm for me. It is a very, very small sense of a morality in that sense. But what I'm talking about here is that I now work at a different organization. I work in a small area. And my boss, who is a very nice person, I'm not going to say anything bad about her, but my boss only had 2 kids. So she thinks that 4 or more kids is a lot of kids. To me, 4 or more kids is about a normal amount of kids. So that draws a certain sense of morality and your understanding about how the world works, right? Because if you think that 4 kids is a huge family, I have trouble understanding that aspect. Okay? I was told actually by that same boss, I gotta quit using the word K. Okay, understand, things like that. That's another cultural thing, culture I'm adopted into in my job. Jobs actually are another culture, aren't they? Because you don't want to share everything about yourself at a job, but you have coworkers, you have friends, you have acquaintances, you have people you trust. In a lot of jobs, it's very, very dependent. When we talk about morality, though, morality is very, very basic for most people. For me, morality in a lot of senses comes straight down to the value of human life. And I know there's somebody out there going, oh gosh, I'm not liking where this is going. What does he mean by the value of human life? Well, the value of human life is a huge part of morality. How do you value human life? That determines how you view other people, how you define your morals, how you build a world view. That is a huge part of morality. Is how you treat others, is how people view you, and if they see you as a moral person or not. Because you can be the nicest person to everybody around, but still kick the dog in the backyard. Everybody around outside thinks that you are a good person. However, the moment they find out that you are kicking the dog in the backyard, they are not going to think that anymore. Most people are going to get upset with that. We value life as a whole, but human life is even more defined. Now, I'm not going to say that the dog does not add value, is not a valued member of the family. I'm not saying that. And also, don't already go on the rant of, oh my gosh, he's saying that animals or animal abuse is a thing. Well, yes, animal abuse is a thing, and it is a very, very horrible thing. It is an insane thing, but we'll talk about that at a different time. That's another level of morality that I'm talking about. Okay, kind of getting off on a tangent. So the basics of morality for most organizations, for most cultures, is human life. Just like my kids, I have a certain value and certain morals that are tied up in my children, in my wife, in valuing their existence and taking care of them. That's a very, very simple sense of morality, right? I also, as a general rule, try not to hurt other people. There was a time in my life where I signed up for the military, and I knew that there was a high likelihood that at some point I may have to do things in which would harm another person. All right. Now, when I joined the military, that actually became a huge concern for me. Is would I be able to harm another person? Could I actually pull the trigger knowing full well that there was a chance that I could kill this other person? That was a huge issue for me. It actually really was. It was something I've never really talked about. And for a lot of people, it is something that most people don't actually understand until you are faced with that choice. I'm going to take a breather there because that was a little bit more emotional than I wanted to get on this particular chat. But it goes straight to the point that I'm trying to get across about morality and human life. Human life and morality are very much so in the same ballpark. Your morality can be shown in how you value human life. It was very, very hard for me to understand the fact that I may have to harm another person. The way that I justified it, the way that it fit with my morals is that that other person was going to harm me, was going to harm the person next to me, was going to harm the person next to them, was going to harm very, very many other people. And that was true. Because where I would have been deployed and where I would have been doing that, there was all sorts of situations in which that person was now going to hurt a lot more people. So the value of human life in that particular instance was very culturally based. The military is a great example of a new culture in which you could get adopted into. And I love the military culture in some ways. That was one that really shook me to my core and was a very hard thing for me to deal with. So when I talk about valuing human life, then we got to look at the other end of the spectrum. In this particular situation, that individual was going to harm me, was going to harm other people, and was going to harm other people and other people and other people and more other people because they did not hold the same cultural values. They did not have the same morals as them. He saw me, potentially, and obviously this is not based on a real situation, because I have never actually even aimed a firearm at another human being. Well, maybe accidentally in basic training, that sort of thing happens. But that individual in that sort of setting had a different cultural belief in which I was lesser than human. Okay, so when we talk about this, we can get into historical aspects of in World War II. Do you know what soldiers do in a lot of cases in order to justify this to themselves, to make them feel better, to not have to talk about it? A lot of soldiers and organizations, when they go to war like that, will then start dehumanizing the enemy. They will use different phrases to refer to the enemy so that they appear less than human. In World War II, the British called the Germans Jerrys. They said it in a very derisive tone, although I'm not really sure how that's an insult. But at the time, once again, culturally different. They called them Jerry's. Germans, I'm sure, although off the top of my head, I can't think of exactly what the Germans would have called the British. But, oh my gosh, they called the British something, I'm sure. This happens in every aspect of life. This has happened in history, all throughout history. Going back further in American history, you can go back all the way to the founding, in which we called people slaves. And there are various other phrases that I will not say because that is just wrong. And I don't want to call people that because they get offended by it, because culturally speaking and morally speaking, that is just wrong to say. But we called them slaves back in the day because culturally and morally, those things were okay. We devalued human life. Well, you know what? I'm not going to say we, because I'm sick of that. I'm sick of hearing that. People devalued other people's lives all throughout history in order to justify horrible things that they have done to other individuals. Slavery is still a thing. Slavery still happens today. All around the world, slavery happens because people devalue other people's lives. They don't look like me, so they aren't me. So I can treat them how I want. I paid for them, so I get to treat them how I want. So valuing human life is now a moral and cultural issue. If we look at it through that lens, through history, yes, slavery was an atrocious thing that has happened, that will happen, and that is a continual thing all throughout human history. We can see documentation of that actually happening. Because of the justification, because of the cultural values, because of the moral values that change over time, we hopefully learn our dang lesson and stop doing that. But no, we don't. We see it go to other things. We start devaluing other things. For example, and I'm going to throw one out that's going to get a lot of people angry if they ever listen to this. What do you call a baby in the womb? I just told you my viewpoint. I said a baby in the womb. Do you call it a fetus? Okay, I'm going to let that sink in, because that is another way in which we are devaluing human life. We are saying that they are a fetus. We are not acknowledging the human life there. So my submission to you is we look back now and we look back at the Americans, the early United States, when they were 13 colonies and they were putting together the Declaration of Independence. They were putting together the Constitution of the United States, which is still one of the greatest documents ever written by mankind, up there with the Magna Carta and various other documents such as the Bible. And well, there's a long list there, so I will throw those out. And yes, at the risk of sounding like some fanatical conservative that everybody's going to go like, oh, he's just another one of those talking heads. No, this is an actual fact. Because look at it culturally and valued at a moral basis. Do you not think that in 2,000 years from when that happens, from when we are where we are now, do you think that there are things that we do in our society that we are going to look back at, that humanity is going to look back at and be like, I can't believe they did that. I'm so embarrassed to even be associated with people who did that. Think about it, because culturally and morally based, the value of human life has been how we judge people. How we get judged. Where do you stand? Are you a moral person?